What kind of magic coffee or witchy voodoo was put onto Jim Lee to make him so damn good? Good at everything, except for maybe backgrounds. Welcome to part 1 of this series, where I'm going to be investigating Jim Lee's X-Men from the 1990s to try and find out what made it so magical and how we can learn a bit of this magic to make our art just as good. In case you don't know who Jim Lee is and you somehow stumbled across my little comic art channel, firstly, hello, welcome. And secondly, Jim Lee is one of the most famous comic artists in the history of, well, ever. Whether you love his work or you dislike his work, and good job for staying, by the way, if that's the case. Let's get to this recipe for Jim Lee's dynamic figures. Step 1. Male proportions. A common way of measuring proportions is using what we call a head count, whereby you take somebody's head, you stack it vertically, and then you use that to map out where the key parts of the body are. Jim uses approximately 9 to 9.5 heads tall. As you can see here, I'm comparing Jim Lee's Magneto to the How to Draw Comics the Marvel way. This can make Jim's heroes seem extra tall when compared to their Homo sapien counterparts. So in simple terms, to make our characters look more like Jim Lee's, let's use his measurements. 2 heads down is the male centerline of the pectorals. Approximately 4.5 heads down is the end of the crotch. Above 6 and 7 is the knee line. And it finally ends with 9 to 9.5 heads at the bottom of the feet. In heroic moments, Jim tends to make smaller heads and extra wide shoulders beyond his normal 3-head width. Step 2. Female proportions. Females in Jim's world are around 9 heads tall. Approximately 2 heads down is the center line of the breasts. Around 4 heads down is the end of the crotch. 6 heads down are the knees, and 8 heads down is where the ankles start. As for width, female torsos are around 2 heads wide. Step 3. Poses. Now we're on to the more fun stuff. And with Jim Lee, no pose is boring. All poses, even when standing, bracing, or running, all have their own personality and all feel similar to one another. It's fair to say that he has magnificent use of shape language. Whether you like his style or not, it is quite clear that he has studied gesture extensively. When it comes to females, Jim Lee's females' hips tend to be sort of dislocated. His females are never ever able to stand up straight, but hey, it makes them look incredibly dynamic. In one of Jim's streams, he explained that hips and shoulders should be opposite to each other in terms of their rotation, and if there's a straight line going between the hips and the torso, the 2 lines should never interject or be parallel, as this is a symptom of your pose being boring or stiff. When it comes to flying poses, and in particular women, what Jim loves to do is twist the chest and the hips. He always brings up one leg. While I'm on the topic of flying, what Jim loves to do is he loves to give everybody very straight hands, almost as if that energy is coming all the way through the body, all the way through the legs, and coming out through these incredibly tense hands. When Jim is drawing men that aren't flying around and are grounded, he has a particular way of drawing their chests, whereby their chests are at an almost uncomfortable angle. An example of this is if the rotation is forward, as if they're bracing for a fight, or if the rotation is backwards, it gives a very domineering stance. Step 4. The details. With this section, it's all the little tiny bits that couldn't really fit into a box, so I've made them fit into a box, and I've called it details. What's surprising to me about Jim in his X-Men days is that he doesn't use very many jagged lines. He uses a lot of curves. He does use jagged lines, however, where it's definitely needed, such as elbows or ankles. Another aspect which Jim doesn't draw is veins. He never draws any bulging veins on any biceps or legs or anything like that. To be honest, this surprised me, because given the time that this came out, when bulging veins and overabundance of rendering and jagged lines were all the rage, Jim was using curves and using them purposefully. In terms of arms, Jim has common lines he uses on both the inner and outer forearm to give extra detail and more vascularity. When he draws females, he even adds in these forearm lines, and this is about the most detailed in terms of vascularity and muscles that you'll see Jim draw in women, at least at this time anyway. Speaking of muscle definition, part 2, Jim loves drawing leg muscles. He will take the opportunity to draw any extra muscly legs that he possibly can, even if clothing isn't necessarily skin-tight lycra. I saw a video of Jim once, and he explained that the way he draws muscles is if he has 2 American footballs that are squeezed together, and I think this shows perfectly when he draws leg muscles. If you were to play a Jim Lee drinking game, I would say 9 times out of 10, if there's a character in a panel, they will have a fist. Jim loves drawing fists. Another thing that Jim seemingly loves is anything to do with sci-fi, be it spacesuits or techno backgrounds. No matter the panel size, he will put an infinite amount of detail that is not really necessary, I think, because he just really enjoys it. Now we're on to what Jim doesn't love, and that is feet. And who can blame him? If he can hide feet behind smoke or a rock, then he will. And why not? When he does draw feet, they're often a sort of a basic shape, and there's no real detail to the boots. They almost look like they're lycra themselves. Step 5. Putting it to use. From what we've learned so far, why not put it together? Let's create a splash page and see if we can do it a bit like Jim Lee. First things first, let's decide a setting. I'm thinking, at the end of the issue, there's a battle in the city, so why not go with that? I will be adding a video later about how we go on with backgrounds, but for me, it's important to get the setting in my mind and have a basic idea of what it is that I'm doing. On to thumbnailing. Let's have a think. I'm thinking maybe some sort of triangle composition where Magneto is at the top and we can have the rest of the characters scattered around. And let's keep in mind to use both the foreground and the background behind Magneto to utilise space. For a basic thumbnail, I don't think that looks too bad. Let's get cracking with the detail though that we've learned from Jim Lee's dynamic figures. So that's it. That's the end of video 1 of this series. I hope that it's been useful and that you've learned a lot. I hope this video has given you the inspiration to go out and study your favourite artist. Let me know in the comments below who your favourite artist is and who you think I should do a series like this for next. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it the old thumbs up. And if you would like to see this mug again, consider subscribing. Until next time, have fun filling up your sketchbook, and I will be back with part 2 of Jim Lee.